In Bhopal, India tonight, another horror story continues, the aftermath of that poison gas leak that has killed more than 2,000 people.
A worker walks past Tank 610. Inside the steel tank sits methyl isocyanate, a chemical so volatile that even a small reaction can turn deadly. Down the corridor, a gauge begins to move. The needle creeps past the normal pressure line. In the control room, the instrument panel lights flicker under the fluorescent glow. One number keeps climbing. Temperature. Pressure. Something inside Tank 610 is starting to react. Outside the Union Carbide pesticide plant, the city of Bhopal is asleep. Streetlights glow over narrow roads. Families lie asleep. Children curled under blankets. More than 500,000 people live in the neighborhood surrounding the factory. And none of them know that inside a steel tank just a few hundred meters away, a chemical reaction is building. Back inside the plant, the gauge keeps rising. The tank begins to heat. Operators lean closer to the instruments. Something is wrong, very wrong. And in a few minutes, a safety valve will rupture, and a cloud of toxic gas will spill into the night air. A cloud that will drift silently over the sleeping city. By morning, thousands of people will be dead. This is the story of the Bhopal gas disaster. December 2nd, 1984. Night falls over the city of Bhopal. In a small home not far from the factory, a man finishes his dinner, washes his hands, and quietly reaches for his work clothes. For him, it was another night shift at the Union Carbide plant, a factory that wasn't always here. Years earlier, this land was chosen for one purpose: to build a chemical plant that could produce pesticides for India's growing agricultural sector. The plant in Bhopal was set up to manufacture a pesticide known as 7, used by farmers to protect crops from insects. To produce it, the factory relied on an intermediate chemical, methyl isocyanate, MIC, a substance that had to be handled carefully. The location made sense at the time, close to farmland, close to a workforce. And over the years, the city grew around it. What had once been open space slowly filled with homes, families, shops, entire neighborhoods forming just outside the factory walls. Many of the people living there had nothing to do with the plant. They weren't workers, just ordinary residents of Bhopal, living close to something they barely understood. As most are already asleep, the man begins his walk toward the factory, a place he knows well, a place he has been to many nights before. By the time he reaches the Union Carbide plant, the city behind him has settled into silence. But inside, the facility is still running. It always is. He clocks in, picks up his log sheet, and walks toward his section. Pipes stretch overhead. Valves line the walls. Large storage tanks sit in the shadows. He begins his routine, checking gauges, recording readings, temperature, pressure, making sure everything stays within range. He stops at one of the tanks, Tank 610. He looks at the dial, notes the reading, writes it down, and moves on. But inside that same tank, something has already changed. Not visible, not obvious, just a small shift inside the chemical. A reaction beginning slowly, silently, and no one inside the plant has noticed it yet. But as he continues moving through the plant, carrying out his routine checks, everything still feels normal. He stops at another gauge, takes a quick glance, and immediately notices something isn't right. The needle is higher than it should be. This gauge tracks the pressure inside tank 610, and under normal conditions, that pressure is expected to remain steady. He leans closer, checks it again, then looks down at his log sheet and compares the numbers. Immediately, he realizes the pressure has increased, and this is not normal. He writes it down, but this time he doesn't just move on. A few minutes later, he returns to the same tank and checks again. The number has climbed further. Now it's clear this isn't a small fluctuation. He calls another worker over, and together they examine the gauge before moving to a second line connected to the same tank. Inside a system like this, pressure doesn't increase without a reason. And inside tank 610, that reaction has already started. Water has entered the tank, and with methyl isocyanate, that creates a dangerous situation. The chemical begins to heat up, and as the temperature rises, the liquid expands, pushing the pressure higher. Back on the plant floor, the worker places his hand on a pipe connected to the tank and feels a vibration running through it, stronger than before. He heads toward the control room. Inside, the operators are already focused on the panel. Multiple readings are changing at the same time, with temperature rising and pressure following closely behind. Both are increasing together, and that combination is a sign that the reaction is accelerating. Someone checks the cooling system, which under normal conditions is meant to keep the chemical stable and prevent exactly this kind of situation. But the readings do not slow down. They continue to rise. Inside the tank, the reaction is building on itself, generating more heat and more pressure with every moment. The worker looks back toward the tank. From the outside, it appears unchanged, but internally, the system is under stress far beyond its limits. There are safety systems designed to manage situations like this, to reduce pressure and prevent dangerous gases from escaping. But in this moment, they do not stop what is happening. The pressure continues to climb, the temperature continues to rise, and eventually the system reaches a point it cannot sustain. A safety valve opens under the force of the pressure, and gas begins to escape from the tank. What starts as a release quickly turns into a continuous flow, forming a toxic cloud above the plant. Once released, the gas spreads into the air and begins drifting beyond the factory, moving with the wind toward the surrounding city, where thousands of people are still asleep. Inside the plant, the workers step back, realizing the situation has moved beyond their control. Not far from the factory, the city of Bhopal is still asleep. Inside their homes, families lie unaware of what has already begun to move toward them. The first signs come quietly. A man wakes up, coughing. At first, he doesn't understand why. The air feels different, sharp, irritating. His eyes begin to burn. A mother wakes to the sound of her child crying. The child is struggling to breathe, gasping, unable to understand what is happening. Across the neighborhood, more people begin to wake. The air is no longer normal. It stings the eyes. It burns the throat. Breathing becomes difficult. People step outside, hoping for relief. But the moment they open their doors, the effect is worse. The gas has already spread through the streets. Confusion turns into panic. People begin to run, not knowing where to go, only trying to escape the air around them. Some cover their faces with cloth. Others carry their children and move as fast as they can. But the gas moves with them. In the darkness, visibility is low, and the streets quickly fill with people coughing, collapsing, calling out for help. Many don't make it far. Some fall where they stand. Others lose sight of their families in the chaos. Inside hospitals, the situation becomes overwhelming within a short time. Patients begin arriving in large numbers, all showing similar symptoms: burning eyes, severe breathing difficulty, uncontrollable coughing. Doctors and nurses try to respond, But they don't know exactly what they are dealing with. They don't know what gas has been released. They don't know how to treat it. They can only react to what they see. Oxygen is given where possible. Basic treatments are attempted. Outside, the streets are filled with movement. People trying to leave the area. Vehicles overloaded. Others on foot. Entire families moving through the night, searching for clean air. But the gas has already spread across a large part of the city. By the time the sun begins to rise, the scale of what has happened is becoming visible. The streets are no longer filled with movement. Many who tried to escape did not survive the night. Inside homes, on roads, near the factory, the impact is everywhere. What began inside a single tank in the factory has now reached the entire city. By morning, the city of Bhopal is no longer the same. The streets that had been filled with movement just hours earlier are now quiet. People move slowly, trying to understand what has happened during the night. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses continue working without fully knowing what they are treating, doing what they can as more and more patients arrive with the same symptoms: burning eyes, damaged lungs, difficulty breathing. Across the city, families begin searching for one another, moving from hospital to hospital, calling names, hoping to find someone alive. But for many, the answers come quickly. For others, they never come at all. In the first few days, thousands of people are already dead. As the scale becomes clearer, the numbers grow. Over time, more than 15,000 people are believed to have died as a result of the disaster. And far beyond those who died, the impact spreads even wider. More than 500,000 people were exposed to the gas that night. Many survive, but with injuries that do not go away. Breathing problems, eye damage, chronic illness. Conditions that follow them for the rest of their lives. As the city struggles to recover, attention turns back to the factory. Investigators begin piecing together what happened inside the plant. Inside tank 610, the sequence becomes clear. Water entered the tank. The chemical reacted. Temperature rose. Pressure followed. And once it reached a critical point, the system could no longer contain it. The gas escaped. But the disaster was not caused by a single moment. Because the plant had safeguards, systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of event. To control temperature, to neutralize toxic gas, to stop it from reaching the outside. So the questions begin. Why didn't those systems stop it? Why was the reaction allowed to build? Why did the gas reach the city? Attention turns to the company behind the plant, Union Carbide. The factory had been built to produce pesticide, but over time, conditions inside the facility had changed. Some safety systems were not fully operational, others were not in use. And on that night, when they were needed the most, they did not prevent the release. In the days that follow, the disaster draws international attention. Responsibility is debated. The company's leadership comes into focus. Its CEO, Warren Anderson, arrives in India. He is taken into custody briefly, then released, and allowed to leave the country. He does not return. Years pass. Legal cases continue. Compensation is paid to victims and their families, but for many, it does not feel like justice. Because the impact of that night does not end with the sunrise. Survivors continue to suffer long after, and the site of the factory remains, a reminder of what happened there.